Hello there. Hi, I'm so glad to see you. I'm Dr. Robin Gould. I'm glad you joined me today for our about 55 minutes together as we are going to talk today about Pesach, so Passover, as that's starting tomorrow's sunset. So that's exciting. It's my favorite holiday. For a lot of people, it is. It's kind of like, I guess, if you're new to this, it would be the equivalent to maybe when you might have used to celebrate Christmas or something like that. This is sort of Sukkot, one of these major times for us. And anyway, that's just something exciting, and share that with your friends and neighbors. And I'm going to give another kind of weird message a little bit. I want to share some deeper ideas about Pesach from my perspective and things that I see as an attachment specialist. And I think it's exciting and interesting to understand the metaphors of the Bible. The Bible's a very metaphoric and symbolic book to bring you into a deeper intimacy with the Father. It's really important that we understand that, because I think a lot of times people think they take things in the Bible literally that are figurative, and they take things, figuratively that are actually literal. And it doesn't mean that there aren't many literal things, but there's always symbolism, right? There's always something, I think, really that I find meaning to. But we do have a good Father who gives us good fences and good guardrails to keep us safe, so we don't fly off the road, off the cliff, into the ditch. And we have a great Father. So thank you for joining me here on lambnetwork.tv. You can go to that channel and get this program and other good programs, so you can, no matter what's going on in any other social media forum or platform, that's where you can find this program. So glad you're here, and remember, the future begins now, and especially now, right? Because we have Passover, we have Pesach, so this is really exciting. So let me just launch in, since we have a lot to discuss, and I just want to talk about a few elements about Pesach. So I'm not going to read the portion, you should read that. I want to talk about, and actually this kind of is piggybacking a little bit off last week. If you saw last week's, and I'm trying to think of what the date was last week, was I think it was the 7th. So I think it aired. No, yeah, it aired, I believe, April 7th. So go ahead and check that out, because there might be some parts here that I'm going to link and connect, and I won't really repeat much of that. But one of the things that I talk quite a bit about is, I do come from the realm of psychology, not probably 90% of psychology that a lot of people might go to, but I do dig my heels in a good 10% that I feel is very strongly indicated in the Bible. It's a construct that really started with the Bible. Is the Bible, right? Because we have a mind, right? We are given a brain, we are given a way of thinking and processing information. And so for people to discount psychology entirely, they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, for sure. People taking psychology as a standalone theory are missing relationship, and that doesn't work either. So it's really all about your mind, your spirit, and your body. Okay, so we are all made in human form, right? And we have an image. We're in the image of Elohim, which I really do think it is templated in by the temple. I just saw a little glitch, and I hope we're not losing internet in any way. But anyway, okay. So I want to talk a little bit about, now. Let me just start by saying, so Passover is this extravagant romantic gesture, from my perspective, where the Father is demonstrating his efficacy, his skill, his pursuant nature toward you, toward humans, right? Like, he loves you, and he wants you, and he wants you to want him. We love him because he first loved us. That doesn't mean he programmed us to love him. What he did was he programmed us to love, and he is lovable, and he made us, right? So we're programmed to default to love, but it's the love he gives us that we're able to give back to him. So what that tells me is that the basic, your existence means you're loved. And he tells you, you're commanded to love him with everything you are and to love your neighbor as yourself. And the only reason you can do that and obey that command is because he first loved you. So you're not loving him to get love in return. You're loving him because he loved you, and you also still get love in return. Win-win, right? That's really important. Okay, so let me get a little comfortable because we're going to get a little cozy, and we're going to talk about some stuff about Pesach. And I owe my mother $1. I said the word stuff. It's not a word that in my family was considered showed intelligence. Anyway, okay, so Pharaoh. Let's talk about the word Pharaoh. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go into a word study on the word Pharaoh because it isn't a word study. And maybe there is a root situation of how this works, but this is the title that was given for Egyptian kings. It isn't the word itself that interests me. It's that it means Egyptian kings. What are Egyptian kings? Okay. Egyptian kings were different from Hebrew kings. Very different. Now, as we know, right? We know this, that Elohim's like, if you really don't want a king, yes, we do. It's going to bring you trouble. We want it anyway. Okay. So this was a construct that we came up with. But here's the thing about Pharaoh. Now, Pharaoh is an Egyptian king, as we said, and Pharaoh believed, and the people believed, that he was their deity. Okay, so wrap your head around that. Okay. You ever think about double dipping in politics now where something's a conflict of interest? Well, here you go, right? Now, we believe, oh, my allergies. Look at this. I'm already starting with this. This is not good. The grass is at 10, so bear with me. Let's hope this doesn't, I can feel the sneezing. Okay, so, what does it mean that Pharaoh was considered divine? So it means that you're the leader that eats the food you eat, lives in, okay, this human was considered God to them. Now, we believe in the Hebrew construct that the people who were kings, our kings, were put there by Elohim, right? And that's a thing. But the Pharaoh is a different thing, because Pharaoh is the top god, and he leads he or she, there were female pharaohs, they would lead their people in not just the worship of them as the deity, but the false gods. You get that? That's interesting, right? So they're sharing some power there with these other gods, these little g gods, because they're not really gods, right? So let me go in here and see. So they worship these false gods, and they would have to provide, they had a sacrificial system of their own and things they had to do. And you'll see this in all little g god worship throughout all of pagandom and whatever, right? Is it requires human sacrifice. It requires going against the instincts and programming the Father created your being to manifest when operating optimally, like a maternal instinct, right? You have a maternal instinct. It's not in your maternal instinct to kill your own child. But these little g gods in the pagan world and Egyptian world and all of these different, it's this idol worship everywhere, passing the sons through the fire, right? That goes against this maternal instinct, this really sacred part of a woman and her desire to protect her child, and the paternal instinct, the father's instinct to protect their child. So to please these little g gods, you had to go against your biological nature that was created for successful attachment with the Father. What does that mean? What? That's not good. Okay. So they worshipped these pharaohs. They were worshipped, and the false gods, the little g gods, that would hurt you if you didn't do what they said. Now, sometimes in so in the mainstream, in the religious mainstream, you kind of get this templated idea of like our Father in heaven being like that, which is not true. It's not like if you don't do what I say, I am going to hate and hurt you. From my perspective, there's a way to live that is safe, good, and harmonious with the goodness of Elohim. And the way to live, you're safe, your neighbor's safe, and it's obedient and it's worshipful. Okay. It's a way to live. It's important that we live this way. And if you don't, curses come upon you. And that word curse really is consequence. So if you're warning somebody, if you put all your money at the casino and you stay there and keep playing, you're going to lose your money. Like if now, so let's say they start playing at the casino and they lose their money. You didn't make them lose their money. You told them the consequence of that action is you're going to lose your money. Okay, you didn't create that reality by saying that, even though a lot of people believe that to be true. And I'm not saying that words don't have power and that our body doesn't hear the things we say. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is the Father didn't go ahead and sneak into the casino minds of everybody and infect all the things. He's telling you don't do these things or these things will happen. But the God of Thor or whatever these other little g gods, these fake gods are, it's like it's thundering, it's raining, it's horrific, it's whatever it was, will do all these things so that it'll stop. This God will stop hurting you when you do what you say. And then you like revere the God because you kind of have Stockholm syndrome. So that's kind of how I see that, right? But I see that sometimes is misunderstood and we apply some of those principles to our God, which is not true. But Pharaoh is this false God. So I want to kind of parallel this to your experience now. We are told to tell the story of how our God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob delivered us from Pharaoh. And we're to tell the story every single year. From then till a year we can't do it. Okay? We are to do that every year. So why? Because it's a relevant story. So that not only do we see how amazing our Father is and how capable he is of delivering his people of slavery, but let's look at what slavery is. We need to be delivered today. Now, last week we talked about deliverance and I talked about the construct of what I think deliverance is. I shared kind of bravely. I've actually gotten a lot of good feedback, so I'm a little braver now. That what I believe about demons would be definitely more in the Jewish template. We create our own demons in our mind, and I think the demons here are all in people's minds. I don't believe they're real. I don't believe the demons are coming out of people. I believe that what the demons are the constructs of falsity that we rely on instead of Elohim, things that interrupt that relationship. And I'm going to show you why I think that, give you a couple of things to support my claim here. You don't have to believe me. This is my opinion. I could be wrong. I'm just telling you the way I see it. Okay. Now, Pharaoh is a figure that worships false gods, leads people in worship of false gods, and is and runs the system. Okay, Pharaoh, really interesting. I always think of Pharaoh as the false mind, the mind that is not the mind of Yeshua, the mind of when Adam and Hava were hiding from him instead of running to him. Hiding from him with their own solutions instead of knowing he is the solution, right? So Pharaoh to me signifies things in my own life. Like what's the Pharaoh in my life? Every year I go through this with myself. I ask myself, what's Pharaoh for you this year? What do you need deliverance from? What has enslaved you? What's led you into idle stuff where you rely on whatever X, Y, and Z is so that you can make it through the day? Every single year, I have to go through that and cross over every year. It's always new. It's always something different. Sometimes the same things creep up, but there's always a mixed bag here that I deal with every year. And so these false gods, this idol worship, it enslaves you. And what we need to realize is what the Israelites needed to realize. What Pharaoh didn't want you to know was that, hey, wait, pretty soon they're going to realize there's so many more of them than us. And then they're going to rise up and feel strong and powerful. And they're going to not want to be slaves and be bullied around by us, making bricks with straw and clay and putting them together and building our structures and living the life we tell them to live, and they are serving us. Instead, they're going to be free people, right? Where they were given, of course, this great land but the Pharaoh who did not care about Joseph rose to power. Okay, Joseph is Messiah ben Joseph, right? This idea of this messianic idea of you're free, like you're saved, like you can do this. The Father enables you to do this. The Father gives you the strength, and He actually does it. But here's the thing that's interesting about Pesach and how I'm able to kind of put this together every year, and it's so transformative to me. And that's why if you're having a little Passover with little celebration with just a few people, or if you're having a big one with a whole bunch of people, blessed be the name, good. It doesn't matter. Focus, go inward here. And realize something. This can be powerful this year, no matter what your situation. Passover is bigger than whatever your situation is. That's the point. So we have these 10 plagues, right? And each plague, which the Father, Elohim, when you look at what they were, they all correspond to a false god that they worshipped in Egypt, right? That they revered and feared and everything. Well, the Father shows dominion over all these little g gods, as such a good Father will, right? He shows you, I am capable of overcoming this little g situation that you've constructed in your mind, right? I've got it. So all of these plagues, they all go ahead and study that out. They all correspond to these little g gods. So the Father doesn't just say, you don't see, like you see when you're teaching your children to swim, and like dad or mom is in the pool and they want the little child to jump in the pool. What the parent doesn't do is like it become invisible, or like just jump in the water and then I'm going to jump in after and keep you from drowning. No, they're right there. Like you see me, there's my hands, right? So he's showing you, I'm waiting. My hands are open. I'm strong enough. I can catch you. You'll be okay. Jump. Okay. So each plague demonstrated this victory over these false gods. So here's the message of Pesach. Okay, now I just, went through my house and removed the leaven, which is kind of a hard job. Not as hard for me because I have celiac disease, so I actually have a lot less leaven things than I used to have. But, I take my toaster out. It's got crumbs in it. There's a lot involved in cleaning out the leaven. And that's kind of a metaphor in and of itself of the things that rise and take on a life of their own. Get that out, right? Get that out. That's just my opinion of how I kind of look at that. So the message of Pesach, once you get there, once you've done this, you've cleaned this out, you're starting from scratch, you know what? It stopped working. Pesach is like Passover is like, you stop because I am, right? I am, so you can just stop working. And so there's this whole waiting aspect of Passover, right? They waited with their staff and their shoes on and ready to go. And they didn't even let their bread rise because okay, let's keep going. We'll get into some of the details here. Because when something comes suddenly, you just don't know. You can't predict what that looks like or how that is, right? They were given instructions of what to do on their door. And then the Father passed by, right? Because He chose to. He wanted to do that. And we did this as a community, right? So it was like, you do this, and that death would pass by you, right? It would pass over. It would skip you. Okay. So the message there is trust Him, as weird as it may sound, and death passes by you. Now, physical death is the worst that can happen, right? But they can only kill your body, right? You get that? So in biblical days, physical death was not the worst thing. Now we think it is, but they didn't. But we trust Elohim and do his prescriptions like a 2-year-old, like, yep, don't put the fork in the socket. Okay. And you trust the parent, right? You need to be of age to know, to trust. Now there's a little baby, they're maybe 18 months old, and you say no, and they understand the word no, but they still think that looks fun to do. So we're in between the milk. We want to get to the meat. We're still in that toddler child stage that Yeshua says, bring them to me, and please come to me as a child so you can see the kingdom because it's in you. We got to get to that perfect, ripe little age where we're born again, and we start over, and we remember we're his kids. Okay. When we trust him, we're able to eat meat. We're not just on milk. We're actively choosing intimately to trust him. Okay, wrap your head around that. Oh my gosh, time is flitting by. Now, I want to talk about the death of the firstborn. Now, the death of the firstborn of Pharaoh died. Okay, the firstborn of Pharaoh. Ooh, this is getting really neat now. I want to talk about the firstborn. Okay, there's a good firstborn and a bad firstborn. You kind of get that idea, right? Like Israel's my firstborn, right? Like you're getting this idea that oftentimes it's the follow-up kids that are the younger is going to serve the older because the firstborn, something's going on there. I think this is a huge message and metaphor for us to understand and to grow closer to our Father. So the death of the firstborn, let's just take from a literal sense, let's look a little bit about this. Now, if the firstborn doesn't value the self you were given, so as I always say, the definition from my perspective and from what I understand that I learned in Judaism is that humble, meek, humility, that word means you appreciate the self you were given. So that means, right, thus, hence, we do not create our own selves. We are made in the image. We are not to recraft, right? So we appreciate the self we were given. And Moshe was the most meek. He appreciated the self he was given the most. And he was raised in Pharaoh's house. I mean, what more do we need? But he was the one who was raised in Pharaoh's house. He was a Hebrew, and he fully appreciated the self he was given. And that came with some controversy and some conflict and some stuff he had to go through when his compassion moved him to beat the people that were hurting the Hebrew, right? Like he had to flee, and he went out into the wilderness to figure all this out. And he was the one that the Father said, you'll draw the people out, right? So if the firstborn is founded on a lie, then the rest is going to, it's like a domino effect. It's like a domino effect of problems. Did you get me? Okay, I'm going to explain this a little bit more. Because I'm going to actually use a literal example here. Okay, now, before I do that really quickly, I just want to mention, because I'm going to end on that, but I want to actually talk about a couple of things that I think. So now this is something it was years ago, and I read oh my gosh, my allergies. I read something. It's really fascinating. I haven't been able to find it since, and I'm going to find it, but you're like, oh great, you're going to tell us something so obscure you can't find it anymore. And it's not that I probably couldn't read about this a lot more, and I've seen snippets here and there, but I just want to say that one of the things that resonates with me is the idea of the cherubim. I'm not saying this would be the only thing about the cherubim, just a feature. Is like they're described sort of like wings, like you have wings, but if you think about like your ears, can have that look, right? It's like this certain shape of the ear. It's a unique feature. When you think of the mercy seat, you have these cherubim, like, right? When you think of like ears. So what's between your ears? Your mind, right? What would be in the Ark of the Covenant would be your heart, right? Where the Torah is to be written. Okay. Very, very interesting. Just something to think about. Is your mind is a part of this whole situation. You have got to get your mind right. You have to allow the Father to get your mind right. All right. So it's a lot about trusting and intimacy. So the idea is that if you're trusting, the Father says, hey, go from what enslaved you, and there will be obstacles that I am going to remove. Not you, I am going to remove them. These obstacles. I'm going to remove a perfectly good sea from in your way because I'm leading you to see there's nothing I can't do for you. So they get to the sea, and of course he parts it and they cross over. And that's the word for Hebrew, right? But it's because he can and does do it. Okay. So he makes a way and we follow, right? He delivers you. Now, to get back to this whole idea about the false self being demons we create, right? That's what I think the false self really is this construct of a reality we create for ourselves. We live in it. And we erect these safety behaviors to keep living that way. That's the work I do. And a lot of the work I do is like we're helping people find out what are these false gods, these little g gods in your life that you feel like you have to please and do to not get punished or whatever, right? People are like that. Adam and Hava did it. That's why you get that first story. So this is where we create the gods ourselves. So getting back to the death of the firstborn, I think that's a metaphor of getting the firstborn, the one that is qualifying as the one getting the inheritance of the firstborn, might need some changes or need some shifting or whatever. And here's a piece of how I think this is looked at it. Now, Pharaoh's son was considered a god and the next ruling deity, right? But let's just go look at Israel. Let's look at if I could make a connection here. I've never seen people do this, so this might be a little clumsy, but I'm going to just try to share with you the way I see Reuben, right? Because the firstborn of Israel, okay, the firstborn of Israel, in terms of you have Jacob that becomes Israel after his wrestling match, right? He's blessed and his name's changed to Israel. And his first son, the firstborn, was Reuben, right? So Reuben, now let's just look at basically what he's known for, okay? Because oftentimes it's the younger that's going to serve, or the older is going to serve the younger, because there's a reversal. It didn't matter their birth order. What mattered was the level of intimacy and the qualities, and the character of the one that was going to be the one that leads. Okay. Now, did Jacob love all his sons equally? Yes. Did he have his favorites? That word favorites might seem like what we think of as favorites now. But in that construct and at that time, that would mean this. So when Jacob met Rachel, and that was the one he wanted, any offspring from that union would be special because that's what he chose. But when Leah was given to him, which the sages would believe that they were twins, that's why he didn't know. When he was given Leah, that was not by his free agency. That was by someone else's idea of what would be right and how they could get away with something. So he specifically chose Rachel, and that offspring and the fruit of that union of this intimacy was going to be very special to him. That doesn't mean he didn't love the other sons. It didn't mean he didn't give Leah a burial place next to him. Like, right? So what's interesting here is that Reuben is so Bilhah is would be his stepmother, and that was one of the concubines, which is considered a, sort of a wife that Jacob had. But what happened was he had intimate relations with her. Okay, so that's not allowed. Okay, so that tells me that there's a boundary that Reuben crossed into his father's territory where he was not supposed to go. Now, when I talk about the false self, is that not exactly what we're doing? Is that not exactly what Adam and Hava were doing when they tried to be like God? Instead of understanding and being humble and appreciating the self that they were given, they wanted to escalate themselves up and elevate themselves and raise themselves to be equal to Elohim, compete with him. And when that didn't work, because you can't, they took pieces of creation to cover up how they tried to be like him, again, trying to be him, trying to solve their own problems. Okay. And then they're hiding from him because they're naked and ashamed, which means they're confounded. So Jacob, like when he's dying, right? I have some notes here. What does he say? He says, Reuben, you will no longer excel, for you went up into your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. You crossed a boundary. You went into my area. So this was so upsetting to Jacob, right? That he took the birthright, the firstborn birthright, away. He doesn't get it. It goes to Joseph and Judah, right? It's like kind of split. So it's interesting. If you look at First Chronicles 5:1, you're going to see that how that. Just go ahead and study that. But in a lot of traditional sources from the rabbis, rabbinical sources, they're going to say that they argue, and I'm actually quoting right here. I'm actually quoting Wikipedia because I'm thinking about the place that the people you talk to are going to go first, and I actually wanted to. I want to keep it as real as possible about what people are going to encounter in case we need to correct things. But they argue, and I'm going to quote, and I quote, that the birthright had included the right of his descendants, which would be the tribe of Reuben, to become ruler over the tribes, transferred to Judah, like I had said before, and the priests transferred to Levi. However, some of these sources argue that Reuben had not actually had sexual activity with Bilhah, but instead had simply supported the cause of his mother Leah by harming that of Bilhah, angering Jacob. So basically, again, going into where he doesn't belong. The father can sort out the problems in his family. We don't need to go ahead and jockey for position and make things happen. And you know what? We are loyal to each other, but understand also Abba is on the throne, right? He can take care of his family. Just take that little nugget there. Okay. So then, you can read more, and Wikipedia goes into kind of some of the cooler stuff about how Jacob, in the end, did want to show some honor to Bilhah. And anyway, go ahead and read. That gets a little in the reads there. But the rabbinical text would argue that Reuben immediately showed contrition for his actions in regard to Bilhah, and thus was, the first penitent. And it says initially, according to these sources, he practiced this penitence by secretly meditating and abstaining from meat and wine, right? But then you had the whole issue with Judah and Tamar. Then Reuben admitted what he had done. So this is according to the sages, right? That lest his other brothers might be suspected of his deed and then punished for it. So this is kind of to honor this voluntary penance, as they say in confession. And but then you have there's actually so much more to Reuben. We don't have time because like we're just about almost out of time. But what's interesting is that Reuben was part of that plot to get rid of Joseph. But in the end, he actually is the one who persuades his other brothers to stop short of killing him. So it didn't go that far. And he even tries to rescue him. And then it says, and he later concludes that the trouble the brothers run into in Egypt was because of what they did. This is divine punishment. Like this is the consequence of what they did. And it talks about how Reuben ultimately, after going through a bunch of stuff, he's motivated by this sense of responsibility over his brothers because he was the oldest. He was the firstborn. And he becomes really, really angry when he finds out that, you remember when Joseph was gone and they couldn't find him anymore. They went back to get him because they had, of course, sold him to the Ishmaelites. And so what's interesting is that, the story after, right, what happens with Joseph is like, this was meant to be. But what's interesting is that it says here, the rabbinical sources argue that the first cities of refuge were located in the territory of the tribe of Reuben, since he had tried to save Joseph from the mob of his brothers. So that's where they're linking together these character aspects of character and saying, oh, how interesting that they would do that. And so they believe that Reuben was born on Kislev 14, and he died at 125 years old. And it argues that when he died, that his body was placed in a coffin and later taken back to Israel, where it was buried. So anyway, there's a place in Israel, a site that people pilgrimage to in an annual festival before the 1948 establishment of the state of Israel. Now go ahead and you can read this. I'm literally just reading this from Wikipedia, so it's really easy. Just go ahead. But it's just interesting to read about that firstborn and what he went through. He went through the sort of things that the Israelites went through. Like they go to get bread because there's a famine, and they get comfy and they get special land and privileges, right? And they get comfy there. And then little by little, they allow their oppressors, they allow their providers and their neighbors to be the relatives. Joseph was the reason everyone survived, right? But they slowly allowed oppression and tyranny to take over their lives. Little by little by little. And that's like us, right? Little by little. Okay. And so the idea of what's the Pharaoh in your life? What is the thing? So what is the false god? So like we talked last week, what are the things that you're a slave to? Now, I'm not penalizing anybody. I hope you don't hear this. I want you to hear this as a message of freedom and encouragement and compassion, because I have my own massive closet of things that I am really working at. Maybe not a billion things, but a lot of what's there, okay, that I need to deal with. Because little by little, I let this take over. And this becomes what I serve. This is the demon I create with my own mind by deciding I need to solve my own problems. I need to grab fig leaves and cover up. I'm confused about my identity. Why? Because I'm not humble, right? Because I'm not appreciating the self I'm given. I need to create my own image. I need to be making God in the image I make him, and then making myself in the image I am. It's a fake world, right? That's the false self. It's not even real. It's a construct. And we live being that horse chained to that plastic lawn chair. They could immediately walk away, but don't even know it because of that leash. That leash gives you this false sense of entrapment. But the father noticed that they had gotten themselves into a pickle. Like they were literally enslaved. And they didn't even have the mindset of knowing they could leave. So what did it take? It took some radical stuff. It took radical plagues. It took blood in the water and lice and frogs and darkness. I mean, really, talk about run the gamut of like, wow, stuff's happening, weird stuff's happening. But in the end, they prevail. And it isn't even that firstborn generation of the plagues that gets through in the end. It's that next generation. So what does that mean? We go through generations in our development, right? We are born a certain way. We see the world and try to conform to it. Then we get rebellious and don't want to conform. So we're conforming to not conforming. We're basically following anger and we're not conforming, right? We go through generations and we jump from false selves to false self. I mean, there have been times where I felt like I was a massive people pleaser and then, well, I don't want to be that. So I'm letting go of that. And then I'm an island, and like, well, that's just the withdrawer. That's not victory. That's just you shifted one false self for another. I'm not trying to scare you or make you feel like the progress you're making isn't progress you're making, but then comes Passover. Remember this. You aren't going to part the sea, right? You're not going to part the sea. The staff didn't part the sea. The obedience of lifting the staff and the community there, this is what parts the sea, right? What's the sea? You tell me. You tell me. Look at your life. Look at what Pharaoh is behind you. Look at what freedom could look in front of you. Oh, you don't know? Well, the Israelites didn't know either. They didn't know what they were going. What? They're going to go to a land flowing with milk and honey. They want that. They can't picture it. All they know is slavery. Okay, yeah. And then comes Passover, right? Because we're not born to be slaves. That's not the Father's will for our lives, that we're slaves to these little g gods, these demons we create ourselves. So why would Yeshua produce them? Well, in his presence, his love, his strength, everything he is, that which isn't him and of him is going to be noticeable. And it can't be, they can't share space. Now, we are a hybrid of many things, good and bad. We're a mess, right? We're all kind of stuff. That's the human experience. We that's why we walk through our salvation we walk it out with fear and trembling, because it's hard. Life is hard. People are hard. Living is hard. The soil is hard. The ground is hard. The sky is hard. Everything's hard for us. And that's how it works. So the cherubim, right? Being where we would open that curtain and be able to get in there. This is important stuff. This is so important that our mindset is right. We have to know who we are. We have to know who we aren't. Moshe knew who he was. He did. He was raised in a situation that he just trusted was meant to be. His mother puts him in the basket. He gets pulled out by Pharaoh's daughter, right? And was it Potiphar's daughter? I'm trying to think. But whatever, the leadership's daughter. And he, the point being about Moshe, right? The guy who knew who he was the guy who helped you and who helped the people escape what enslaved them. So when you're picking out mentors, try to find the Moshe-like ones, the ones who appreciate the self they're given. And, be careful who you listen to and who you're letting touch you, put hands on you and tell you things, right? Like, just be careful. It's not all as it seems. And I'm not trying to foster fear in you or get you to worry, but, you will know them by their fruit of who to follow. Okay. Not all of us have the best fruit all the time. I don't, there are times, man, I just, I'm in the middle of my own thing. I, work through things like you do. Just, of course, that. But the mentors I pick are people that bear fruit, that I look up to, right? That I feel like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And a lot of times time is what bears that out. But who's Pharaoh, right? False God himself, leading you to worship these other false gods that he himself even obeys. Well, just nothing to me screams louder than the false construct of reality we create when we forget to listen to him, to trust him, to believe in him. We are erecting these safety behaviors to keep us safe. I have to do all these things. These people have to like me. I have to look a certain way. I have to be so smart. I can't make a mistake. This has to be perfect. I can't even handle the life I brought on myself, so I have to use substances so I can manage. I'm afraid of my own thoughts. What can numb me out? Okay, my own brain's just going to numb me out. Let's do that. Many, many, many little g gods in our lives that we serve. Now, do we worship them? No, but serving is still a part of idolatry. We serve them. We do what the false self says. The false self says, blah, blah, blah. Says jump, we say how high. And we do it. And we have created that. So yes, we are our own problems. And yes, we are our own solutions on some level. But from a bigger understanding, yes, we are our solution in terms of we need to put the blood on the door. We have to be ready with our staff in hand. Don't even let your bread rise, because when the moment's right, you're going to be gone. And when you get to the sea, don't worry, it's going to part. It's part of this whole system. So yes, you are your own solution by what you choose to do, but you have no choice over who you are. You are his, and he loved you so you could love him. That's a beautiful picture. This is an extravagant story of romance. When you're sitting tomorrow night at your Seder and you're hearing this story isn't just for you, it's about you. It's about you today. It's about finding Pharaoh and leaving him behind. Don't study Pharaoh for too long. And don't keep telling the story of all how bad Pharaoh is. Really, he's a small part of the story. He's not mentioned that much. What's really mentioned is all the stuff the father did, right? And the people did. Oh, and they ran into trouble and they did all kind of stuff. And this is a process, right? Where when we're leaving slavery, right? That saying you hear all the time, they might have gotten out of Egypt, but Egypt hadn't gotten out of them. It's because we need a mindset shift, a heart. It's not just always just our heart. Sometimes it's just about the way we're thinking about things. We're thinking about it wrong and our heart follows. Sometimes we just have to get our mind right. We have to get the translation right. We have to understand what the word means. And that's why people can start reading the Bible and understand the Torah is relevant for today, because before their mindset thought they understood it before they even read the words. And then when their mindset shifted, then they could actually read the words for what they were saying. And they're like, I can't believe I didn't see this before. I always read Galatians as blah, 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 blah. But now I actually see factually. So in my Becky books, right? So I have these Becky books. These are my books: Marriage and Divorce and Remarriage in the Bible, Peter's Vision, Beacon or Bacon, First Century Words. Check this out. And then Colossal Controversies. There's so much irony in these books in that the way we read them, before we really understood, number one, what the words mean, what the culture meant. We didn't just kind of get told the story that we confirmed with our Bible reading, but we actually were like, let's really read it. And you're like, ironic is that we have it in the past believed the exact opposite of what it said. It's ironic. Well, that's the same thing. Passover is one huge ironic thing. You are free. You just didn't know it. You were given the choice land. But somehow, through whatever, you said yes too many times. Right? And when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to another, and vice versa, right? Well, their yeses were too many on the wrong side of yes, and their no's were too many on the wrong side of no's, because over time, they were overtaken and they needed a deliverance. And yet they still had to they had to go to the edge of the pool and then look down, and there's Papa's hands Okay. And it's hard to jump. They were like, wait, what? Are we going to die here? Right here? Papa says, nope. Do you see me? I'm here. The water's only up to here to me. I'm good. I catch you. And then you jump and you're caught in these hands. And that's what Passover is. You can jump. So when you're sitting around the table, look to the person to your right, look at the person to your left or the person across from you and think, this is your Passover too. And support each other and talk about who's Pharaoh. We're not running from that Pharaoh. We're running from our Pharaoh today, whatever that looks like. And don't go to politics for it. Go in your own world. Go in your own life. Go in your own day in and day out. What are the things you're constantly praying out about and needing victory over and struggling with and grieving over and crying over? What are those redundant prayers that you're just constantly like, oh, I'm in this mess again. So what did they say? In their heart, I think a lot of them said, Father, we said too many yeses where we should have said no's, and we said too many no's where we should have said yes, and here we are stuck in this. We don't know any other way to live. This is radical, all these things happening. And guess what? I want out. I have brought on myself consequences I cannot handle. So, as weird as it may need to look, get me out of here. And as I'm going, I'm probably going to be like, wait, what? This isn't what? Help, right? Yes, that's what we're going to do. Humans do that. If your neighbor does that, don't get too mad at them. Just, hey, it's okay. Passover's here. Every year, we retell the story. And we don't run from that long dead in the tomb with all his special stuff. Pharaoh. Pharaoh's alive and well in our lives, but yet not really, because there really is no Pharaoh. He's a symbol. We create Pharaoh. Now, yes, we do have tyranny in the world, oppressive stuff. Yeah, that's a Pharaoh for sure. There's always that metaphor. But what can you do about that? Really nothing. You know what you can do? Sit at your table with your Passover situation, with your Seder plate, with all the things you do. And you know what? Pass over. Let the Father, when I say pass over, let the Father, and when I say let, he's going to do it. Watch the Father shuttle death across your threshold and back on by. Watch him do it. If he says he will, he will. And then you're not dead. Your firstborn, not dead. But what it says is, if you trusted me and you put the blood on the doorstep, your firstborn's not going to die. Because your firstborn isn't built on a lie. Reuben crossed a barrier, the firstborn, and he lost the birthright. If your mindset is based on a lie, if it's Reuben, all that's going to come after it is going to be all kinds of junk. But all's not lost. There's still your lifetime to continue to reconcile and, repent and contrition and recompense and do the things that we can do. And the Father honors that. So Pharaoh is a part of our life every day because we aren't perfect. We're just like Adam and Chava. And so the person you're with tomorrow night, the people you're with, you might be alone. You know how you're never alone? Do you know that? All that stood at that Mount Sinai, they're with you. Because of the people who weren't there, were there. It said that, even those not standing here today. Well, vice versa. Our ancestry is with us. Maybe not physically, but in the spirit of Elijah, and we keep that Elijah cup sitting there, right? Waiting for him to get through that door. Yeah. Hope is real. And Passover is real. And I want you to have the best one. I want you to really focus. And I want you to just find that moment, whenever it is. And when you feel just that little tiny sense of freedom, that one moment, you ever notice that? You just kind of have that good feeling? Just privately to yourself, just be like, yes, just do that. You don't even need to tell anyone you're doing it, but just tell yourself, when I get that little feeling, just even once or part of that feeling, I'm going to be like, yes. Or just create your own gesture, but something that you're going to do, plan it. That you're like, yeah, I'm crossing over. I'm crossing over. Bye, Pharaoh. It might just be one thing. I don't know what yours is going to be. I have a bunch this year. I don't know. I got a big Pharaoh this year. He's like huge. So I'm working on that. And actually, let me rephrase that. I'm stopping working on that. And I'm going to settle and have my staff in my hand and just be ready at a moment's notice to cross the sea that I'm not going to part. And then I'm going to eat the manna that's provided. It's going to be glorious. I'm going to see that this year. That's what I'm saying. So I hope that's what you are doing and what you have. But anyway, thank you so much for everything. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me just make sure. Sorry, you got to see my ring light. Just got to make sure I can see what I'm doing because we got these little letters. But anyway, I'm glad that you were here today. I'm glad we got to talk about this. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Hag Sameach Pesach, and
we are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.